Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Emily Steele. Emily's the co-founder and CEO of HummingBirds, which started here locally in Des Moines, Iowa. Emily, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk all things marketing. It's like my favorite subject.
Absolutely. So for those of you listening who don't know who Emily or HummingBirds is, why don't you do a quick intro on kind of who you are and what you do?
Yes, so like I said, I'm Emily. I am kind of like your serial entrepreneur person in the world. Right out of college, did a lot of work in community development and nonprofit. I worked really closely with small businesses to kind of help look at kind of a holistic approach to how do we make communities thrive? And a lot of that's, the small business community. I was really inspired by, these small business owners and what they were doing. And I was like, my background's in marketing. How can I help them be more successful in promoting their brand and promoting their district, et cetera? So felt like I really got my chops in the the real world and the nonprofit community development space, and then kind of spun up my own really side hustle brands like pop-up yoga, DSM. Before anyone was doing yoga with cats and goats and wine and beer, we were trying to bring it to market and make it this creative, fun thing, and brought a women's networking group to life with hundreds of women in Des Moines, and just really fell in love with brand building and getting people excited about something in their own backyard that they could engage with, that brought them purpose and meaning. And so HummingBirds kind of came of that. I was running a local marketing shop called Love Local in 2018, and just realized as I was working with a lot of local clients that wanted to tap into this brand building superpower I had built, a lot of it was how do you get people to know about you and love you? And, that's creating connections with people, getting people talking about you, because we trust our friends and family over any other form of advertising for the most part.
Sure.
And so for me, I was so curious around building a community of kind of these hyper-local people who could be amplifiers for local brands, who had a trusted local network, but not the influencer play per se, but kind of, right? Everyone has influence, but how do you tap into the people?
On the local level. That's what you do.
Yes, exactly. So I was who are my local people who, if they post about a new restaurant opening or a new brand to go try at a grocery store, I'm going to listen to their recommendations and go do it because I like them or admire them, etc. So my goal is to bring those types of people together in Des Moines and see if we could make a dent for the small business community. And, through trial and error, just like any, entrepreneur, you try, you put it out there. I was oh, wow, we're getting some momentum here. I hired a guy to develop some software to make it a little bit easier than managing a bunch of spreadsheets of local creators. And I ended up getting a lot of interest from brands in other cities. And I think deep down I was there is something really, really massive here. Everyone's doing influencer marketing in 2020, 2021, but no one's doing it at the local level. And local is so impactful for these small businesses or these brands that need to drive product movement off of shelves at grocery stores or retailers. There's a play here, and I want to own this because it sounds really fun and meaningful. And so I kind of, in 2022, raised $1 million in a pre-seed round to kind of get HummingBirds from Des Moines to 15 cities and really prove out the mechanics of that. What does it take to scale a brand? Do I have to be in the city? Is the secret sauce of Des Moines that I'm here and I'm the loudest, hummingbird, if you will. And so once we proved that out and got our revenue to a really good spot, we raised $3.3 million in November 2023, and we're going to go to 15 more cities this year. And we've just been exploding because it's the right time to really be playing in the creator economy and helping brands understand how to drive behavior through people-powered marketing. So that's really
absolutely
that's my story.
And I just had Bryce Borcheller on.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's part of the founders of the Iowa Media Group. They run Iowa Chill. They run Midwest versus Everybody. I'm sure you're familiar with those brands. But he talked about the difference between micro influencers and macro influencers. And I believe that's part of the business strategy of what you're doing with HummingBirds is that micro influencer level, because especially on a local level, you have more authenticity, you have more trust with people that you're talking to. So I thought that was a very interesting perspective from him, kind of going that micro versus macro when he's pitching to brands versus other, bigger influencers that have more followers than him.
Yeah, I would say from the micro influencer standpoint, we're not even in that because And it's all like kind of like there's so many tiers of influencers, right? Like you've got macro, mid-tier, micro, nano, local. So I would say like we're at the smallest level of like influencer tiers, and that local influencers probably could have 500 to 2,000 followers. And you can still like, if you get 200 people to learn about a business in your own city and they're taking action, that's very impactful for a brand, right? So then you're like, oh, if I get 30 local content creators and influencers doing this and they can drive hundreds of new visitors, and, you know, that's like, you don't have to have tens of thousands of followers. And that micro influencer kind of tier is like your 10 to 50K followers. We actually don't want those kind of creators in our platform because we're perk based too. Like everything we do is based on like, hey, you get free tickets to a movie. And like, if you're an influencer trying to monetize, like, we're not the right platform because that's not our value prop. It's all about local discovery and trying new things and getting perks along the way. So, yeah. But
my fiance is a member of the HummingBirds. I'm pretty sure you knew that, and she loves it. She loves every second of it.
It's fun.
So let's talk about the HummingBirds now a little bit more in depth. So one of the questions that I have, I guess, is like, especially on a local level, what's your selling point to those brands of, hey, you only have a limited amount of marketing dollars. Why would you give it to HummingBirds versus digital media, Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads, all the other channels that are available to these companies? What's your selling point for HummingBirds over that?
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm very omni-channel. Like that's the type of marketing I think everyone should be doing is like some here. Like how do you really build something where you're meeting people where they're at? So I've never been like the person who's like HummingBirds are bust. Like that's so dumb. So I would say, you know, I think about brands that are like really leaning still heavily to traditional, and they're like print, billboards, TV, radio. And I'm like, cool. Like you're reaching, like getting some really significant impressions and reach. But as you think about today's consumer who has the majority of the buying power, it is the millennial woman. And guess where the millennial woman is hanging out for multiple hours a day? Instagram and TikTok. Where are they making decisions about new things to do this weekend? What brands they're going to try? Not even proactively, but they're like, oh, all of a sudden I saw my friend post this and I needed to go to this shop and buy these shoes. I didn't know I needed new shoes, but I guess I do, right? So to me, really the value prop is like, frankly, a little bit of like, hey, like this is how people make decisions. And like, if you're still doing these channels that some of them are outdated in some ways, depending on the audience you're trying to reach, right? Like I pay for Spotify. I don't know the last time I listened to the radio, and that's not a diss on radio. It's just like, I'm that target demo. That's different. So value prop for me, it's like, I say sometimes like jokingly, like billboards can't become your customer, but a content creator can. So if you want someone who's going to come into your store, try your product, the chances are they're really going to like it because there's a reciprocity that a brand picked them to create the content. They're likely going to come back and be a customer again. And so you get the kind of like, you think about it as a customer acquisition play. And just the nature of people who are amplifiers, if they really like a brand, they're going to keep talking about it. So you kind of get the benefit of like long-term customer and their kind of long-term loyalty and praise and referrals. And so I look at it that way. I look at the user-generated content that you can get from content creators that are really talking about your brand and their own voice and like their own flavor versus like a highly curated video, which is, again, like not good or bad. It's just different. So there's a mix, right? And just like we've proven like we can drive products off shelves. Like people are getting 4x to 14x lift in sales in different grocery stores or retailers because local creators are talking about them. So we can kind of touch on, like, I always say three things, like your customer acquisition play, your user generated content, so you're getting the assets out of it, and then you're getting like that local reach and impressions, like the thing that some people like always compare or cross-reference to like your other channels that are going to talk about reach and impressions.
That was going to be my next question about ROI. Is like, what does that measurable ROI look like for a brand that does a campaign with you versus, hey, you go to Facebook and you can actually see the data from a Facebook ad or a Google ad. Like you can see data from what you're doing too.
Yep.
But talk about the ROI portion a little bit high level.
Yeah. And I think it just really depends on the brand, right? Some are like, we know like this is a brand play, and people know too, like when you put a billboard up, like how are you tracking that ROI? You're looking at impressions. You're looking at like, hey, if I reach,
even impressions on a billboard's debatable.
Totally. I think like, and you think about like the value of impression, that's a totally like different conversation. But I would say when brands are thinking about ROI, you think about our CPG brands. So the brands that are selling like Olipop is one of our customers. So they need to get like cans of soda moving off shelves at very specific locations in very specific zip codes. They can watch the sales numbers in those specific stores. So that's very quantifiable, right? I put money here with these creators talking about this stuff in Des Moines, Iowa, and it the sales velocity goes up. So they're able to track that, which we've seen a lot of success in the CPG kind of space. And birds love trying new products, snacks, like Thelma's ice cream treats. Who's not going to go get a really delicious ice cream sandwich and enjoy it in your life, especially this time of year? So that, and then, some brands are really looking at do these content creators become customers, and looking at their referrals. So we have some customers who come back annually over and over because they're like, yeah, I can point to 5 out of these 10 hummingbirds who became customers, and then 2 of them became our biggest referral channel. So I think we don't play in the affiliate space because we're driving offline local behavior. So we really can't, we're set up very poorly from a attribution standpoint, because it's all about driving, we want people to go into a store, which we can't follow them around, right. There's no pixels on people, right? So I think we're working on ways to drive more of that clarity from you do one thing as a creator, you post about it, and it creates XYZ dollars. But right now, frankly, there's no easier way to work with local creators unless you source them yourself via DM. So if you want a streamlined, easy way, one-stop shop where you can create campaigns, pick birds, etc., pick creators, we're the only solution for that. So it just depends how sophisticated a brand wants to be.
Yeah. As long as brands see that measurable ROI, I don't think it really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think too, we're in a really kind of good spot. And I think you're not for and it's not the best value prop, but there's still an element of you remember when Facebook pages were built, and if you weren't on Facebook as a brand, you would give people the side eye and be like, what are you doing? How do you not have a Facebook account? We're getting to that point with the influencer creator space where it's how are you not leveraging people? It's available. So
yeah,
it's
and now with a Facebook company page, you might get 5 impressions organically with 10,000 followers, because they really limit that if you don't pay for ads.
Yes. So I'm go to the people. They have the best networks.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. So let's talk about creators now. So talk about what your process looks like, I guess, for finding these local creators. What do you look for in a good local creator that could benefit Hummingbirds and your partners?
Yeah, so we're looking for people who are local amplifiers. They're talking about the farmers markets they're going to. They're talking about the brands. They're using geolocation. We can source probably our first 200 to 300 birds very easily by just looking through leveraging Instagram's features, where people, what are those really cool brands in every city and who's talking about them. So we invite them to be part of our platform in the sense hey, looks like you love what you're, love your community, you love Milwaukee, you like trying new things. I think you would love being a hummingbird. Here's why. And it's free to join. So, it's not a big lift. We get them in the platform. We have all these cool campaigns when we're starting a city too. We're really intentionally seeding the campaigns because we don't, we're a two-sided marketplace. So we don't necessarily have brands who are going to be paying for a platform that has no birds in a specific city. So we're very much getting that engine humming from us seeding campaigns. And so we get them trying all these brands in their own backyard, sharing about it on social, which builds the flywheel effect. People are what's a hummingbird? Oh, that looks cool. I want to join. Brands are oh, what's this thing that my best customer keeps talking about? This MKE Milwaukee hummingbirds. You look and it builds it's our inbound motions that builds that virality. So I would say we really intentionally scoop up the first 200 plus hummingbirds in every city, and then the growth kind of sustains itself.
And that makes sense for sure, because if people see their friends doing things, they're oh, what are they doing? I want to get involved. I know how that works, 100%.
For sure.
So what's next for Hummingbirds then? Obviously you still have a big presence here in Des Moines locally. I know you're in Omaha. You just mentioned Milwaukee. I guess what are kind of those next steps for Hummingbirds?
Yeah. So we've pretty much dominated the Midwest. We have a few more cities we want to get to in the Midwest area. And I think what we've found in a lot of our conversations with brands is that they can't crack the Midwest. And especially in the CPG space where a lot of these very trendy on brand companies are starting on the coast. That's where they're funded or that's where their founders are. And so they're we get LA, we get San Francisco, we get New York City. we don't get y'all in the Midwest. So we're like, we know how to crack the Midwest. So that's a huge part of our value prop too for some of these brands that are like, I don't know how to open this or crack this nut, if you will. And so we're going to really stay pretty central, I would say, and like to the Midwest, but also just like middle of the country, because obviously like getting down to Texas and that isn't Midwest anymore. So
Right.
plans from an expansion standpoint will be like Midwest centric, but also we'll start moving south as well. So that's a little teaser of what's to come. And then like for us, it's really about like, you know, we put our stake in the ground, like local people drive local behavior. Now I want to prove that, and I want to give more people an opportunity to drive behavior outside of social media. You can drive behavior through your social media posts, but you can also drive behavior by having a really cool email list or like a hyper local podcast. Where are the opportunities for brands to be connected to local creators of all different shapes and sizes? So, I mean, I really truly mean this. We're just getting started. We're just really optimizing for Instagram and the influence there. Like in the next couple months, it'll be on, like, we'll be adding TikTok to the platform and like really focusing on that channel. Who knows what's to come of TikTok, but we're like, let's just imagine it's gonna still exist, right? So I think for us, like big things ahead. Like as we hit our like milestone as a Series Seed company, like we'll raise more money in our Series A and like really build hopefully like a national big brand. That's the point.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I follow you on, LinkedIn or whatever else you're posting. It's cool to see your guys' growth and success. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. Now, without giving up any of your secret sauce here, I mean, I guess what are a few tips that you can provide for listeners or brands or just trying to improve the local presence of their business? Obviously, working with HummingBirds would be a tip, but what would be some other just generalized tips for people looking to improve their brand locally?
I think there's the business owner or the marketer who's like, what's the formula? How many times do I need to post to Instagram a week? How many emails do I need to
Trying to hack the algorithm, right? Looking for the shortcuts.
Yeah, or just like really wanting a quantifiable, like, here's the method, do the method. To me, it's always about curiosity and differentiation. Like, different is better than better. How are you different? How do you lean into your differences? Like, I think about some of the brands locally that, like, Marnie is my favorite retail boutique where I get, like, majority of my clothing. Like, she stands for something. She only offers, like, sustainable vegan products. Like, I'm not a vegan, and I care about sustainability, but, like, that speaks to me, and I know Angela, the owner. I think there's a really big differentiator you can have as a local, doing local marketing that connects people to people. Like, at the end of the day, like, people buy from people. And so when you can put more of your personal brand presence into your local establishment, like, who you are, into the brand, I think that makes a huge difference. And I think just like really understanding that social proof is really important. And sometimes social proof means like you're really optimizing to have a lot of Google reviews because like your traffic, that 80% of people come to your website from Google search. Well, you want to look really, really, really good on Google. Like understand how people get to you and then remove the friction along the way. So, like, if a lot of people are finding you on Instagram, but you're finding they're not visiting your website to book an appointment, what are the ways you can reduce friction? Maybe you get, like, ManyChat, like a fun thing. Maybe you've seen this where, like, you can comment on an Instagram post and write join or learn, and you get, like, an automated DM. Like, incorporate some of those things that make it really frictionless for a user or a potential customer to engage with you. So, I think it's all about removing friction, adding social proof, and, like, really being curious. Where are people finding you?
Yeah.
But not like, don't be overly formulaic. I think those are the companies that will lose down the road.
Absolutely. I really like that tip that you said too about adding that personal brand or personal touch to your business because I know the brands that I follow, that's a huge differentiating factor, right? I look at Andy Frisella and First Form Fitness. I wouldn't even know who First Form Fitness was if it weren't for Andy Frisella's brand. Like that's a bigger example, but it applies locally as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about AI, Emily. I want to transition a little bit. I always like to talk about AI in every episode that I have here. So how are you leveraging AI right now? I guess what tools are you using to kind of streamline your processes at HummingBirds?
We use AI, like, not through our platform at this point. It's so funny because, like, AI is kind of, like, very opposite of thinking about, like, local authentic content, right? Like, in the sense of, like, some people are like, well, is AI going to, like, totally demolish your business? I'm like, no. I have no fear, like, no fear there. I think for us, it's like engineering. So when we create campaigns inside of our software, we look to ChatGPT to make our campaigns really like exciting for hummingbirds to see and opt into. So we leverage it to kind of get like creative juices flowing for some of our content and some of our marketing, but we don't over index on it. At this point, I'm like super open-minded to solutions and ways of using it. And we foresee like in the future having, you log in as a brand and you want to create a campaign, like AI will prompt a lot of the like, here's a subject line, here's how to position your perk and offering. Like we will definitely be baking it more into our software, just kind of learning from like a manual effort now to see how we like make that happen. But I'm excited about
it. The ideation element.
Totally. Yeah, I'm excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. I use AI for ideation. That's the number one thing I always tell people too when I consult or talk to them about AI. It's like, if you don't know the answer, just ask AI. And they're like, oh, they never thought of that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But let's keep talking on the topic of AI here. I guess, what trends do you see happening in 2024 or as time goes on, right? So I don't know if you've heard of Sora. That was OpenAI's text to video generator. There's all sorts of new image and voice stuff now going around. Talk about that a little bit. I guess, what trends do you see happening and how that impacts what you're doing?
Gosh, I mean, just knowing like AI creators is a thing, like that will disrupt the creator economy in a lot of ways, like to have those profiles, if you will, like driving behavior. I think it's just something to be mindful of in the creator economy. Like
the AI influencers, like the fake influencers. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And just like, that's something I think about. It doesn't really impact what we do at a local level. I think about, how do I equip our hummingbirds with tools that make it easier to create content or more creative? So as they're like working with brands, how do you leverage AI and some of the solutions to make video editing better for your reels or your TikToks, etc. I don't get too deep in the trenches of like what's happening with AI. I think it's really interesting, like how Google is summarizing using AI, like in like as of late, like when I search for things, and just like,
AI overviews.
Yeah, like. That's interesting. I think that will be really, really impactful. So how do you play the game of that with your content and how Google understands who you are in the world? I guess like for me, I don't get overly entrenched in the AI trends, mostly because I'm so focused on like scaling the company that I'm sometimes like in my like live under a rock. But I think like there's some like curiosities, there's skepticism, there's like fear, there's excitement, there's like all of it around it. What are your thoughts?
There's a lot going on. Yeah. I run an AI YouTube channel. I'm kind of in the weeds of AI. I have to be.
Yeah.
There's just a lot happening right now. It's really just a giant race, in my opinion, with OpenAI, Google. You got a company called Anthropic. They run Claude. If you've ever heard of Claude, they're heavily backed by Amazon. Those are kind of the big three right now. And so it's really just a matter of who's going to come out with the next newest language model, who's going to come out with the next newest video mod. Video is going to be the next big thing. Google just came out with one to compete with Sora through OpenAI. I mean, it's a big race. I see it similar to the .com bubble.
Yes. Here we go. Yeah, and just the amount of funding too for those types of companies. It's like, whoa.
And what's funny too is like companies will throw AI in like an investor call or an earnings call, just hoping that will bump their stock. And all they did was just throw an API key from OpenAI. It's like you didn't even add anything spectacular. You just added some sort of feature and you're using the API call. That's not even your product, but yet consumers will buy into it. It's all about hype.
I know, it is about hype. I'm building the ultimate hype engine of like locals hyping. So I'm like, let's go, let's embrace it, let's hype it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Quacks, Emily. I mean, this is the Marketing Quacks podcast after all, and one of my favorite segments on the show. What are some gimmicks or tricks that you see people do in your space? So I guess what are some things that influencers do that just kind of makes your blood boil?
Oh my gosh. I think what like becomes really frustrating for me is seeing just all advertising. Even with our hummingbirds, sometimes the things that we have to be really mindful of is your organic to sponsored content like ratio. And like,
it's not selling out.
Yes. And just like, even at a local level, like you could totally sell out and be like, if you only do campaigns in our platform and only post about hummingbird campaigns, like you become inauthentic, in my opinion. Like, how do you get that right blend of things that like, show that you're a real human who does other things in the world besides like try brands and promote them? So I think that like, yeah, doesn't necessarily make my blood boil, but I'm like, come on, like, don't you understand that like, you're going to lose your integrity and your like authenticity the more you do that? And it seems so obvious to me, but I don't know that it really is. And I think sometimes too, like what makes me frustrated in the like influencer creator space too is like having a very cut and dry, like, this is exactly what we want you to do with the product. This is exactly what we want you to say. And you're selling out again, right? You're scripted in what you're putting in a caption. It's like, Emily doesn't talk like that. Like, that's clearly like written and approved by a brand. So you like kind of take like the creativity and the flow out of creators and influencers when you basically script everything. You just want someone else to cut the video or take the pictures, etc. So to me, I'm like, brands are missing out so much because they're like holding so tight to control versus like letting their own creators and customers talk about their brand freely. And it's probably, they could probably learn a lot by having other people express like their brand experience. So I would say those are a couple things, and just like how much it's kind of gotten out of control with just like, it's really hard to know like what's the value. What should I pay for this influencer? Right. What should I pay for local creators versus a mega influencer? And just like, it's there's a lot of like clarity around like how people price for TV and print and radio. That's gotten pretty standardized, I would say, but you're borrowing someone's trust, and some people have a lot more trust than others. So how do you make that make sense in a pricing model? So again, something that I'm just like, oh, that sometimes just like really makes your head spin, because some people will be like,
and I'm sure sometimes you talk to these, executives, and they're just so stuck in their ways of using print, radio, magazines, Absolutely. Whatever these traditional models are. And it's like, you can try to convince them and show them the numbers and have data-driven stuff in front of them.
Yeah.
But because of their old mindset, they're not going to listen to you because that's just how they always are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, you're not an ideal customer anyway. So you do you. That's fine.
I've run into that before too. Trust me, I know how that works.
Yep.
So, Emily, this has been fun. I guess any final note you have on just advice for local influencing and just marketing in general, just for anyone listening here that they can take away?
I guess like the openness to like working with your own customers, working with your own like ambassadors or local creators, like depending on if you're listening, like being open-minded to like getting other people excited to try your brand and talk about it. Like, I don't know who's listening to this today. Maybe someone's like really, really savvy with this and doesn't need to hear the advice, but someone who's like been on the fence, like it's not that hard to get started by finding your best 5 customers and saying, hey, like I'm gonna give you 5 free tickets, 5 free appointments, whatever it is. Like, I'd love to see like what happens when you talk about my brand in the wild to your trusted network of peers and followers, and like let that motion like be part of like an experimentation. Like, I think it's so fascinating. Like, people are learning from their peers, and so why not leverage that? So my like, just give it a try. You could do it with your own base of people who already like you and already shop with you.
Yeah, no, that's great. So where can people find you online for more info?
HummingBirds.com. We secured that domain. That was very exciting. So that's where HummingBirds exists. I hang out quite a bit on LinkedIn personally, as well as Instagram. You're going to get a little bit more kid flavor on the gram, but I feel like that's where like the most human Emily shows up in the world. So
perfect. Yeah, I love it. Well, Emily, thanks again for joining this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. And thanks again to everyone listening. Be sure to tune in again to the next episode.